She was just waiting for a ride. A backpack on her shoulders, headphones in her ears. The bus had just pulled away, and the sun was beginning to dip behind the ridge. To anyone else, she looked like what she was, a young girl heading home from school. But to one man in uniform, she looked like trouble. 14-year-old Aaliyah stood alone at the small-town bus station, her shoes scuffed from walking, a library book tucked under her arm. She wasn't talking to anyone, wasn't making a scene. She was just there. That's when Officer Gary Maddox pulled up in his patrol car. Didn't ask if she needed help, didn't ask if she was okay. He asked for ID, then asked where she was really from, then accused her of loitering, of trespassing, in a public space. Within minutes, his hand was on her wrist, then the click of cold metal. And just like that, Aaliyah was in handcuffs. For waiting, for existing, for being in the wrong neighborhood with the wrong skin color. But what Officer Maddox didn't know, what he never even thought to ask, was who Aaliyah's mother was. And that mistake would cost him everything. If stories like this move you, make you angry, or make you want to stand for something, don't forget to like, comment your thoughts, and subscribe to the channel. Because some stories aren't just worth telling, they're worth remembering. Stay tuned, this story's just getting started. Aaliyah Moore was 14, quiet, curious, and too smart for her own good. At least that's what her middle school teachers always said. She loved science, read mystery novels like they were candy, and had dreams of one day becoming an architect. But right now, all she wanted was to fit in, just a little. She and her mother had just moved from the south side of Chicago to a place called Echo Hills, Colorado, a name that sounded like something out of a real estate brochure. Tucked away in the foothills, Echo Hills was picturesque. Manicured lawns, solar panels, designer dogs in designer sweaters. But beneath the surface, something else lingered. An air of polite exclusion, of practiced smiles and whispered judgments. They were the only black family on the block. Her mother, Dana Moore, didn't seem fazed. Then again, not much rattled someone who spent 15 years with the FBI. Dana wasn't just any agent. She specialized in organized crime and political corruption. She had taken down mayors, unearthed bribery rings, and once faced off with a cartel leader without flinching. But none of that mattered here. Here, she was just a single black mom moving into a neighborhood that wasn't built for people like her, or her daughter. And watching them closely from the very beginning was Officer Gary Maddox. 58 years old, thick mustache, mirrored sunglasses, and a badge that had gotten heavier with time. He'd been with the local police department for over 3 decades. Folks around town called him Old School Gary, meant like a compliment. But old school came with baggage. There were whispers of traffic stops that lasted too long, of reports that mysteriously vanished, of words said that no one dared put on paper. Complaints had been filed over the years, but they went nowhere. The system had his back. And now he had his eyes on Aaliyah. What he didn't know, what he couldn't begin to imagine, was that behind Aaliyah's quiet strength stood a woman who had stared down much worse than a small-town bully with a badge. And Dana Moore wasn't about to let history repeat itself. Not here, not now, not to her child. It was a Tuesday afternoon. Quiet, still, the kind of day where nothing was supposed to happen. Aaliyah stood beneath the awning of the Echo Hills transit station, her backpack resting at her feet, a well-worn copy of The Secret Garden in her hands. The late autumn breeze tugged gently at her curls, and somewhere nearby, a wind chime tinkled lazily. She didn't notice the squad car pull up. Officer Gary Maddox had driven past the station 100 times, but today, he slowed. Today, he saw something, or rather, someone, who didn't belong in his picture-perfect town. Aaliyah looked up just in time to see the cruiser stop directly in front of her. The door swung open. Heavy boots hit the pavement. "You," he called out, voice sharp and cold. "Where you from?" Aaliyah blinked, confused. She tucked the book under her arm. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Maddox said, already halfway up the curb. "What are you doing here? You live around here?" "Yes, sir," she replied politely. "I'm just waiting for my mom to pick me up." Maddox narrowed his eyes. "ID?" I don't have one," she said honestly. "I'm 14. He scoffed. "Don't play smart with me." Before she could say another word, he reached forward, grabbing her by the wrist and pulling her up from the bench. "Hey," she gasped, stumbling. "What are you doing?" "You're loitering. You're not being cooperative. I could take you in right now for trespassing and resisting," he snapped. Aaliyah's voice trembled. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You don't have to," he said, tightening his grip. "You just have to look wrong." All around them, people stared. Commuters, shoppers, townsfolk. They watched, eyes wide, faces blank. But no one said a word. Not one person stepped forward. Not one person helped. And Aaliyah, just 14, standing on a public sidewalk with nothing but a book and a backpack, found herself treated like a criminal. Because she dared to exist. But just a few blocks away, a phone was ringing. And when her mother picked it up, everything would change. The text came through just as the meeting wrapped up. Dana Moore stood in the glass-walled conference room of the FBI's Denver field office, gathering her files, when her phone buzzed once, then twice. Urgent messages from an unknown local number. Something about a teenage girl being detained at Eco Hills transit station. Something about her name, Aaliyah. The world seemed to narrow. Her fingers tightened around the phone. 10 minutes later, she was behind the wheel, speeding through mountain roads. Still in her dark blue blazer, no badge visible, no sirens. Just a mother with fire in her chest and a voice in her head whispering, "Not my child, not today." By the time she arrived, Officer Gary Maddox was standing with his arms crossed, smug as ever. Aaliyah sat on the curb beside his cruiser, her wrists red from the cuffs, her eyes wide but dry, too stunned even to cry. Dana stepped out of the car slowly, deliberately. Her heels clicked against the pavement. She walked toward them with a calm so cold it could slice glass. Maddox didn't flinch. In fact, he smirked. "Ma'am, this is an official police matter. You'll need to stay back." Dana's voice was even. "That's my daughter." He didn't budge. "She was uncooperative, and we have reason to believe she was trespassing." "She was waiting for me," Dana said. "At a public station." Maddox snorted. "And you are?" Dana reached into her coat pocket and, without breaking eye contact, produced a leather badge case. She flipped it open. FBI, gold shield, federal credentials, all of it. For the first time, Maddox's smile faltered. Dana took one step closer. Special Agent Dana Moore, Organized Crime and Civil Rights Division. The silence that followed was deafening. "You just laid hands on a minor," she added. "Without cause, without backup, and without so much as a report number." Maddox's jaw tightened, but he didn't speak. Dana turned to her daughter, kneeling. "You okay, baby?" Aaliyah nodded. Her voice was small. "He said I looked suspicious." Dana stood, slowly facing Maddox again. Her voice never rose. "You have no idea how much trouble you're in." And she was right. He didn't. But he would, very soon. Dana didn't shout. She didn't storm into the police station or demand apologies in public. She simply went home, sat down at her kitchen table with a cup of black coffee, opened her laptop, and got to work. Years of working in federal investigations had taught her one thing: follow the pattern, and the truth will follow you back. And Gary Maddox? He had a pattern. She started with internal records. They were buried deep, filed under vague terms like community disturbance or non-compliance event. But the names stood out, all of them Black or Latino, all stopped for minor infractions, loitering, improper signage, unusual behavior. Dana filed quiet requests under the Freedom of Information Act. She called in a few favors from federal databases. What she found was worse than she expected. 17 separate complaints had been filed against Officer Maddox over the past 12 years, most from teenagers, single mothers, or elderly men. The pattern was unmistakable: intimidation, physical aggression, unlawful detainment. None of them ever resulted in disciplinary action. Why? Because every report stopped at the same desk, the Township Oversight Committee, a group made up of Maddox's childhood friends, church buddies, and retired officers just like him, the good old boys. But Donna had more than paperwork. She had video. The transit station's security cameras didn't lie. Clear as daylight, Aaliyah standing still, doing nothing wrong, and Maddox advancing, hand on weapon, voice raised, provoking fear where there was no threat. She clipped the footage, saved it, backed it up twice. She interviewed 2 former residents who had moved away after run-ins with Maddox. Both had been too scared to file formal complaints. But now, hearing what happened to Aaliyah, they agreed to speak. What Dana uncovered wasn't just a bad cop. It was a culture of cover-ups, a small-town network built to protect its own, even if that meant harming outsiders, especially black outsiders. She didn't rush. She built the case slowly, piece by piece. Because Dana Moore didn't just want Gary Maddox fired. She wanted every brick in his false wall of authority to come crashing down, and she was almost ready. If this part of the story stirred something in you, anger, hope, or a deep sense of justice, leave a comment below and subscribe for more powerful stories that deserve to be heard. Dana waited until every piece of the puzzle was in place. Then she submitted a formal request for a federal civil rights investigation, signed, sealed, and delivered straight to the U.S. Attorney's Office. She included video footage, transcripts of old complaints, personal testimonies, and a timeline that laid out 12 years of systemic abuse, in plain, irrefutable detail. Within days, the wheels began to turn. Whispers started circling through the town. At first, quietly, a rumor here, a question there. But it all came to a head when the town council called for a community meeting to address recent concerns about law enforcement conduct. Eco Hills was not used to confrontation. The community center had never been that full. Elderly couples who usually kept to themselves showed up. Young families sat in back rows with folded arms, and right there in the front, sitting tall in a navy blue pantsuit, was Dana Moore. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When it was her turn to speak, Dana calmly plugged in a flash drive. The room went silent as the screen flickered to life, and everyone watched what Gary Maddox had done to her daughter. The gasps were audible. Then came the testimonies. A former gas station clerk stood up. "He threatened to deport my uncle if I didn't move along. We were just buying snacks." A retired schoolteacher added, "He pulled me over twice for going 3 miles over the limit, on the same road. Asked me if I belonged in this town." One by one, the silence broke. People stopped being afraid. And Gary Maddox, who had spent decades hiding behind his badge, suddenly looked very small. The next morning, he was officially suspended. 2 weeks later, he was indicted for abuse of power, falsifying police reports, and obstruction of justice. He wasn't just off the force. He was facing prison. And in a town that once looked the other way, people had finally opened their eyes. All because one mother stood up and wouldn't sit back down. It didn't happen overnight, but change, real change, had finally taken root in Eco Hills. A few weeks after the indictment, Aaliyah returned to school. Same building, same classrooms, but something felt different. This time, people noticed her for who she was, not just what she looked like. A girl from Chicago, with a mind for design and a heart full of quiet strength. During lunch, a classmate slid into the seat across from her. No awkward glances, no forced smiles. "Hey," the girl said, setting down her tray. "I liked your science project. You're really smart." Aaliyah blinked, then smiled. It was small, but it meant everything. Meanwhile, her mother was asked to speak at the town's annual Fall Harvest Festival, the same event where Maddox had once posed for photos and handed out safety flyers like a hero. Dana stepped up to the stage, the golden light of the setting sun behind her, and looked out over the faces of a town still learning how to heal. "You don't fight hate with hate," she said, voice steady but warm. "You fight it with truth, with action, with courage, even when your voice shakes. There was a long silence. Then, applause. Long, loud, real. News of Maddox's conviction spread beyond the borders of Colorado. National outlets picked up the story, not because of the scandal, but because of the woman who refused to let her child become a statistic. In the following months, a community oversight board was formed. Real reform began to take shape, and for the first time in Echo Hill's history, a black police chief, a decorated veteran and longtime resident, was sworn in with pride. Standing at the back of the ceremony, Dana didn't say a word. She just watched, one hand resting gently on Aaliyah's shoulder. Justice had arrived, not with noise or revenge, but with calm resolve, unshakable love, and a mother's quiet refusal to accept injustice. Refusal to accept injustice. Sometimes justice doesn't come from loud protests or dramatic speeches. It comes from quiet strength, persistence, and the courage to stand firm when it's easier to stay silent. This story reminds us that one voice, when backed by truth and love, can create ripple effects that change entire communities. Dana Moore didn't just protect her daughter, she challenged a broken system and held it accountable. In today's world, we may not all carry a badge, but we all carry responsibility. Whether you're a parent, a neighbor, or a witness to wrongdoing, speaking up matters. Standing up for what's right matters. And above all, believing that change is possible, no matter your age, is the first step to making it real. If this message spoke to you, leave us a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support helps us tell more stories that matter.